So, what is relationship abuse? According to stoprelationshipabuse.com, relationship abuse is a pattern of behavior that is used to maintain power and control over a former or current intimate partner. Relationship abuse can be emotional, it can be financial, it can be sexual or physical, and it includes threats, intimidation, and isolation. Relationship abuse does not always have to be physical, although that's how it's often depicted. For me, the hardest part about identifying my abusive relationship for what it was knowing the difference between a normal conflict and an abusive encounter. Often because relationship abuse is just depicted as an angry drunk guy who beats his girlfriend up when they have arguments, it becomes very difficult to distinguish the nuances that are used to manipulate people in abusive relationships. But the main difference between an abusive encounter and a normal conflict that you'd find in a healthy relationship is whether or not there is a viable solution at the end. And what I mean by that is abusive relationships, they tend to be very one-sided and they're generally cyclic and ongoing. Meaning, your abuser is not interested in working out your problems. He just wants to control you. And no matter what solution you find, he will just keep looking for more and more problems. Um, a normal relationship, a healthy relationship that has a foundation in trust and love and respect, even though you will have conflict, over time, those things will lessen and you will work it out because the intention is for the both of you to come together and to share a happy and supportive life. Whereas in an abusive relationship, it's ongoing and it's not going to get better over time. It's going to get worse. And no matter how much you give, they're always going to want more. In an abusive relationship, when you have a conflict, one person is going to overpower the other, either by screaming or by being spiteful until the other person gets worn out and says, okay, you win, I'll give you whatever you want, I just can't deal with the stress anymore. To the person who's giving in to the conflict, it might seem like, thank God this is over. Now we can go back to having our normal, happy life. But to the abuser, that reads as, oh, now I know your limit. Now I know how far I have to push you before I get you to cave, before I get you to give me what I want. And at the end of the day, what your abuser wants is power. He doesn't want to work out his insecurities. He doesn't want you to do well in life. He doesn't give a damn. He just wants control. And so in a normal relationship, the topic of conflict is genuinely the topic of conflict, right? Like if you're, for example, insecure about one of your boyfriend's friends or one of your girlfriend's friends and you think like, oh, that person's more attractive than me, or oh, they're really close, I don't know how I feel about that. And you get a little jealous, it's normal, jealousy is totally normal. And you talk about it, you might argue at first, like your boyfriend might be like, what the fuck, you don't trust me? Like, I don't appreciate that, and you guys might fight a little bit, but at the end of the day, like, you really want to work it out, and he really wants to work it out, and so once the initial shock and tension is over, you will have an open and honest discussion about your feelings and come to some sort of solution. In an abusive relationship, those types of situations will usually result in threats, intimidation, and isolation. And that was definitely the case for me. Um, and even when I did finally give in, I still couldn't make the guy happy. He would just find something else to pick on me about, because it wasn't about working out the problem. The problem was created as a means to tear me down as a person. And if it wasn't one thing, it was the other. So if he wasn't worried about my friends, or if it wasn't someone that he didn't like, then it was the way I dressed. And if it wasn't the way I dressed, then it was the way I spoke to him in public. And if it wasn't the way I spoke to him in public, then it was when I came home from work. Oh, it takes you an hour to get home from work. Why did it take you an hour and 5 minutes today? And like no matter what I did, it was a problem. Because at the end of the day, he just wanted to control me. And it didn't matter how he did it, he just wanted to control me. And, you can talk about all the different reasons why someone might feel that way or what makes somebody that way, but at the end of the day, it is not your job and you're not your responsibility and not your problem. And you cannot change anybody. And if that person genuinely wants help becoming a better person and wants to change, he has to do it on his own. And you cannot be subject to anyone's behavior that is going to put you in any danger. Um, Now, knowing the difference in theory between a normal conflict and an abusive one is definitely helpful, but it took a long time for me to realize what was actually occurring. I would just tell myself that over and over, like, no, no, this is a new problem. This is a new issue that we're working out and we're going through. But I was dying inside, to be quite honest, because it never ended. And learning the pattern of behavior that my abuser had was quintessential in being able to identify abuse and being able to come to terms with the fact that I was being abused and that he wasn't going to change. And the reason that it can often seem like your abuser is changing, even if you know that you're being abused, um, you will feel like he is putting in the effort to change, and it makes you want to stick around and help him through that. And the reason why it seems like he is changing and why it seems like there might be hope for the future is the pattern of abuse. And the pattern of abuse, the way it was presented to me, it comes in 3 stages. It comes first as the honeymoon stage, which is, what it sounds like. Everything is brand new and it's great and it's just a good time and it's like a really high high. Like you're just happy and in love and you're doing all these wonderful things together and it's great. And then the second stage is, for whatever reason, something will trigger some tension, whether it's an internal thing or an external thing. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you went from everything being like ridiculously good. Not just like a normal, like, yeah, this is kind of nice, like everything is fucking fantastic, to all of a sudden everything is very tense. And the tension for me was always the worst part of the relationship, because once I fell into this pattern and I could feel the tension, it would make me so anxious to the point where I couldn't function because I was afraid of what was going to happen next, which is the explosion, right? That's the third stage. And so it's honeymoon stage, tension, and then explosion. And I always knew when the explosion was on its way, but I never knew, was it going to be today? Was it going to be tomorrow? I just knew that eventually, like, oh, things are really tense right now. Any day now, he's going to explode on me. And I never knew when it was going to happen or how bad the explosion was going to be. And that anxiety was everything. And he would do everything in his power to keep me in the tension stage. Because as long as I was in the tension stage and I knew, oh, he's mad at me, he's mad at me, I need to step it up and get him to be happy with me again. I need to do whatever I gotta do to make him happy because right now he's mad and I'm scared. As long as I was in that place, he could get what he wanted, which was control. And he did that through a lot of really, really screwed up ways. Mostly, again, going back to threats, intimidation, and isolation. You know, he would threaten to break up with me, or depending on the stage of our relationship, he would threaten to not pay the rent, because at one point he had basically crippled me financially and prevented me from being able to work, and I was financially dependent on him. And so if I didn't do what he wanted, then he would just, oh, I'm not going to pay the rent. And his name wasn't on the lease, mine was. So it was like he wouldn't pay the rent, I would be fucked, and he would just move on, you know? Or he would use his threats to isolate me from my friends, from my family, and I would just be alone, you know? And all of that occurred in the tension stage. And I would do all of these things because of the threat of explosion, right? So I would isolate myself from people he didn't like. I would isolate myself from things he didn't like. I would let him intimidate me, either physically or emotionally, into backing down from arguments when I caught him doing things that I didn't like. If he couldn't lie his way out of it, then he would try to use his size to intimidate me into not arguing with him anymore because I would catch him in lies, and instead of just admitting that he was caught, he would try to bully me into backing down. And the threat that I felt when he was intimidating me into not arguing with him or trying to isolate me from my life was, if you don't do da 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 da, I'm gonna explode. Um, but it's a pattern, right? It's a cycle. And so after the inevitable explosion, because no matter how hard I tried, um, I could never do anything right. After the inevitable explosion came the honeymoon stage again. You know, it's like, okay, I feel better now. I forgive you. And then he would treat me like a queen. Or he would my friend calls it bluffing, which I guess I see now why she called it bluffing, where he would explode and then act like, oh my god, I'm so embarrassed that I did that. I can't believe that I behaved in that way. I am so sorry. How can I make this up to you? And then for 2 weeks, a month, you know, he would be like super extra, like super, super extra to make me feel like he was trying to make it up to me. But no matter what he did, it would eventually circle back into this tension, right? So he would explode on me and then treat me really, really, really well to make up for it, but the issue wasn't really ever resolved. I was terrified, I was confused, I felt disrespected, and I wanted to talk about it. And so when his placating me was not effective after a certain point, then it just went right back to the tension because he didn't want to deal with his shit. So he would just try to intimidate me into not talking about it. when the intimidation didn't work, he would threaten me so that he didn't have to deal with it. And when the threatening didn't stop, right, because I'm a human being and people don't work that way. I can't just turn parts of my brain off because it makes you uncomfortable. And so when the threatening didn't work, then he would isolate me. He would neglect me. He would ignore me. He would make me sit in the house in the dark in silence while he did whatever he did, and it always, always, always reverted back to that. And I think anyone going through abuse, it's very important that you can identify that. If nothing else, you need to learn those two things: the difference between a normal conflict and an abusive conflict, and the pattern of abuse, because it will tremendously, tremendously open your eyes to what you are experiencing, and it will help you make decisions on your own on how you want to handle your situation, and it will help you um, protect yourself psychologically. I think it's really, really important to be able to do that. And so, again, the difference between a normal conflict and an abusive one is whether or not there is a positive end goal, and whether or not that positive end goal is achievable. And if you find yourself in a cycle where everything is amazing, and I don't mean like I'm in a good mood, I'm in a not so good mood. That's normal. But when it becomes very extreme, where one minute you're euphoric and you're doing all these amazing, wonderful things, and you're so happy and you're the perfect couple, and it's like sickening how amazing you guys are, and you go from that to just incredibly and inexplicably tense, and then a huge explosion. Those three stages, when you find yourself cycling through those over and over and over again, and you feel like there's no end to it, that is abuse. Whether it's physical, financial, emotional, or sexual, that is abuse right there. Those three stages repeating over and over and over again with no solution. And so please, please protect yourself and always keep a sharp eye and get to know a person's pattern of behavior when you're in a relationship with them. And if they exhibit that pattern, get out. Get out. And the sooner the better, because the longer you stick around, the worse it's going to get. Knowing your resources and where to go if you need help is also really, really important. And so I will include a link to my video about resources in the description of this video. And education is your number one line of defense in this situation. So I really hope that no one has to experience what I went through. Um, but this information is what's going to help you either avoid those situations or get out of one if you are currently having that experience. So stay safe, stay sane, and I will talk to you guys soon.